Hi, I'm here today with Karen Stewart. We're both in lockdown Sydney. Hi, Karen. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
So, Karen Stewart is a certified practicing accountant and auditor and mother. She was brought up in a Baptist household through her family's connection to Maroubra Baptist Church. Her brother Tim Stewart, she's connected to Scott Morrison. The other way around. North Scott and Jen Morrison.
More powerful these days.
Yes, the famous Jen Morrison. So Karen and I are talking today about her Tim's connection with Morrison, and the fact that he is Australia's kind of most known proponent of QAnon. Sadly, because of that, Karen's family's been torn apart. Karen, can we start by just a bit of background or history? You've known the Morrisons since how long ago? Or how, why?
Well, I think Tim and Linnell got married in about 1996, I believe. So Jen was the bridesmaid of Tim and Linnell at that wedding. Prior to that, Scott and Jen married. Linnell had been their bridesmaid. So I was living in Dubbo up until 93. So it was at that time at Maroubra Baptist Church when they were getting some of the young people from the eastern suburbs in. That was when Tim and Linnell met. Scott and Jen came over to Maroubra Baptist as well. So they formed a strong bond with themselves as those two couples, a third couple as well. So they had Bible study together. They would go out to dinner, socialise together as the six of them with the three couples. So occasionally my other brother would go over for dinner at their house. So there was at kids' birthday parties, all sorts of celebrations over the years. Yeah, we've all been there, got to know each other somewhat. I guess being younger, I wasn't such an avid churchgoer that I didn't see them quite as often as my other brother did as well. But that was, certainly a long-standing relationship. They know mum and dad reasonably well, so it's definitely a long one.
Your brother Tim is known as the Australia's sort of biggest proponent of QAnon, if that's okay to say that. You've described his views to me as extremist radical when we were talking before. For those who don't know, just a quick of what QAnon is, or I won't go into all of their beliefs, but it is worth knowing that the FBI declared them a domestic terror threat. They were implicated on the 6th of January Washington insurrection. So for people not aware of QAnon, Karen, are you able to tell us some of your brother's kind of weird maybe beliefs?
Yep. Now, QAnon will embrace just about every conspiracy theory there is. But from what I was hearing from my brother and nephew, they would talk about cannibalism. There was Satanists, pedophiles. They called them Luciferian pedophiles. So often they would sacrifice babies, eat them. There was the adrenochrome that they claimed they got from the blood by drinking the blood of babies. The red shoes, so when the blood of the children spilled all over the ground, that covered that all up. There was certainly different realms. Dave, Tim, Jesse used to talk about time travelling even, that there were other dimensions that they could go into. Now, I'm not 100% sure that was linked necessarily to QAnon, but certainly part of their beliefs. A lot of operations, things that happened around the world, they would call that a false flag, which included the Christchurch shooting. And that actually, I think to this day, they believe that was a false flag operation that didn't actually occur. So it's the full gamut of things that they just choose what didn't happen. It's almost pull it at will, make it up as you go along. That's certainly how it seemed to me.
So there's all these kind of what most of us would probably think of as wacky ideas. We don't know whether Tim Stewart's wife Linnell believed the same as wacky ideas as he did, but I was actually going to ask this up front, but I was going to ask it later, but I may as well just mention that now. So do you think, I mean, this is secondhand, obviously, that I guess what I'm trying to get at is Linnell asking the question, if Linnell is Jen Morrison's best friend, is she down that what we would term the rabbit hole as well?
I think living with someone as passionate, obsessive about QAnon as Tim and Jessie were, it would be impossible to live in the house almost, not hear it day in, day out. So I believe there will be a certain amount of taking in that information, belief in that. On Instagram a couple of years ago, she certainly posted a picture of herself, I think, in a sunrise that said hashtag the Great Awakening, Sideways Step, which is Tim's blog site. So yes, she certainly was endorsing it. There seems to be some indication she was involved in coercing Jen and Scott into including that word ritual in that national apology that I'm sure you'll get to. But certainly I would say she didn't resist it or stand against it. It certainly seemed to be that she represented herself as endorsing it somewhat.
You want to mention, or just go into that ritual with the apology now? You touched on that.
Yeah, it came to light that Tim was working on getting the phrase ritual sexual abuse into the national apology for children with who had experienced sexual abuse in institutions. So what they viewed that to mean was that all the pedophiles, the Luciferian pedophiles that had abused all the children, it was a shout out to say, we've got you from that. I guess good versus evil concept. Now, the people involved with that were some odd personalities in that regard. Certainly one of them who's made a documentary about herself, as a big following in America. There's not been truth found in her tale. Isaac Cappy was another person who was involved. I think he had a big part in maybe some TV or movie shows. Now, he was someone that Alex Jones from InfoWars thought was crazy. So you're in an area where there are definitely unusual, unique personalities. So they did get together to conspire, really, to have this statement, ritual sexual abuse, saying that needed to be there. So as I understand it, Tim, Linnell had talked about, Jen had talked about how that might happen. So certainly our family knew a couple of weeks out that was what was happening. Yeah. Right. So certainly it stood out as soon as I heard it on the actual national apology. I'd sat over with my mum and dad to watch it with them. It was quite an emotional experience, but the word ritual, that stuck out like a sore thumb to me, because I knew that you would have used the word systematic or systemic. There were other words that would have made more sense. Certainly then when my phone started buzzing, my nephew was sending messages saying, did you hear that? Did you hear that? And then I realised, the horror of they've managed to do it. That was the shout out to QAnon. It was deliberate. I would think it's going to be denied, of course, by Scott, Jen, probably Tim Linnell. But the reality is, how did we know 2 weeks out about anything that was going to be in that speech, let alone ritual sexual abuse? Tim and Linnell shouldn't have been privy to that information either.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So really suddenly you're saying, well, how did we even know that phrase was going to be there? No one had. We shouldn't have had the ability to do that, yet there we were. We knew that.
In the background, there were some text messages between Tim Stewart, a gentleman known as Eli High Priest, who has given me access to some of those messages between him and Tim.
Yep.
One that's actually stuck out was around that time where Tim said to Eli High, Linnell went in pretty hard. She's been with, paraphrasing now, Linnell has been with Jen all morning. So, which I guess brings me to the next thing we want to talk about, which we haven't mentioned yet. Linnell Stewart was employed to work with Jen Morrison at Curability House around that time. They were spending a lot of time together, those two ladies.
Yes, that will have been in October 2018, so that was probably before she was employed. So at that point, she used to stay regularly over there. I think most Sunday nights when Scott toddled off to Canberra, she would stay the night there with Jen. So I believe that it would have been a conversation about religion, that crossover from evangelical religion, that they were probably discussing it. This is what's happening. So it's, certainly it wasn't until August 2019 that she started working there. So she was still having, if what we guesses happened, it would mean that both Tim and Linnell were in an influential position before Linnell even started to work there. So I can only take at face value what Elohim Priest has published on that. I have no reason to refute any of it because it does match what we were hearing, yet we weren't texting about it. But that's how I understand it. My family felt that it was Linnell was the final push that got that over the line.
Well, okay. So I'm trying to find the right way to word this. Friendly Geordie's in the video he did, I think in 2019, when this had all started to come to light, that the two families were close. I'll quote, he said, like the bushes, could be like the bushes of Bin Laden's hanging out. So, I mean, there's no denying that these two families were close. There's been claims that the Stewarts actually house sat at Kirribilli House. That was, as well as being together at New Year's Eve. Also, I believe we're going to Hawaii together in the famous Hawaii holiday time.
Yeah, certainly early on, as soon as Kirribilli House was sort of where Scott Jen lived, there were immediate photos from there. So that would have been then December 18, New Year's Eve. So there were pictures of the kids, at least one of the kids of them there as well in the grounds. The house sitting, I've heard that from someone else, so I'm not 100%, but
it's just a claim. We don't know for sure.
But it was certainly represented that that's what they were doing from what I've seen, which implies that they were there when Scott and Jen weren't, which is somewhat odd. I'm not sure that I lived comfortably with that sitting there. The Hawaii holiday, that was planned for a long time beforehand. We guessed at about a year. So the last time I heard about it was Easter 2019. So they were just commenting, we don't know if Scott and Jen are going to make it, depending on the election results. So it was before the federal election, which I think was that in May that year, somewhere. So there was talk about it before that. So there was a group of Linnell, Tim, Scott, Jan, but then a number of my cousins, their families as well. I think my uncle and auntie were turning up later. So I think almost all those people that were going were linked to Maroubra Baptist Church. Okay. So that had been where they'd all met. So that holiday to Hawaii, when it was really hard, when I saw Samantha Maiden was asking some questions on Twitter, not getting the answers that I knew to be true. So it's tough to think that you're privy to information that just by virtue of a friendship, but it's uncomfortable to see it misrepresented or denied. So I struggled with that. It was tough.
Just something comes to mind. We're talking about the Hawaii holiday in the middle of Australia's, terrible bushfires. I remember distinctly going to the protest at Kirribilli House when Morrison was in Hawaii. I think this what strikes this weird contrast of the people that you're talking about. Certainly, your brother having these extremist radical ideas. He's close to the Prime Minister. That protest was incredible. It's a climate rally. We were sort of saying, where are you, Prime Minister? The police, I would say there were people from all walks of life, every age. I remember doctors, nurses, lawyers speaking. It was incredible. Teenagers, students. The police presence, though, I couldn't forget it. Riot squad, federal police, all there in the cul-de-sac where Kirribilli House is. You might not know it, but it's sort of a dead end. You can't go any further. As we were walking up there, myself, my teenage son, actually, you already felt there was this really quite sinister atmosphere of so much police. Afterwards, there was going to be a sort of sleep in there for the next few days until he came home on Boxing Day. I don't know if you remember that. They were setting up tents, some of the protesters in the cul-de-sac. But as soon as the majority of us moved away, then the police came in and they were all sent on their way. And I don't know if you remember, there was that young girl who was actually
she was really scared. Terrible.
So I just, it's fascinating when you think what was actually, it's like that juxtaposition of that going on.
And then we get the answer, I don't hold the hose, mate. That's not what we're asking for, but the leadership was not there.
Yeah, was not there. I think when we're talking about what he doesn't do, he also doesn't actually really admit to being friends with these. So I'm just he, to quote Scott Morrison, I haven't seen Tim. Once this has all come out, he's been asked about the Stewarts and their influence on him. I haven't seen Tim for some time. I'm closer to his wife, Jenny. I'm close to his wife, Jenny. I'm a long-time friends of her. That is really going to lead me to asking you. You contacted the national. Well, you wanted to bring up some national security concerns you had. You said to me off camera, you wouldn't be able to stay quiet if your brother was a Nazi. I thought that was a perfect summary to lead into that. What kind of then happened, if you wouldn't mind going into that.
I think Scott has distanced himself from Tim as much as he can. I think on 2GB he sort of said, I'm more friends with Linnell than I am with Tim. I haven't seen Tim for a long while. Prior to that, though, at the end of, I think it was around November 2020, he'd actually said to another journalist, I don't know Tim that well, he's more of an associate. So he clearly is wanting to distance himself from Tim. Yeah, those aren't true statements. I don't believe they're true from what our family has witnessed over the years. I think too, QAnon was an unknown thing. I believe it was the first of its kind. I will call it an online cult. There was a research professor into genocide studies prevention named Gregory Stanton. He wrote an article on Genocide Watch saying, this is QAnon. They are playing from the same handbook. In QAnon, Nazism wants a comeback, I think were his words. So I had watched the aggression increase, the threats to us as a family, the threats to me online. So that's when you think, okay, we have the hindsight. We have the gift of hindsight on World War II. Yes, we don't have all the first-hand accounts anymore because of time, age. So what do we do when we feel like someone with the knowledge to know the academic research to say this is exactly how the Holocaust got started? Now, I'm not prepared to be the good German. I wasn't going to sit by and say, I'll just ignore it, they're just cuckoos. If I believe that someone else is saying this is dangerous. So I then became passionate to say to my parents' family that I can't let this one go. If we were back in 1938, family members were joining Nazi youth or the Nazi party, how would we act? But I just figured that I wasn't there in World War II. I have no close family members that were even veterans in any stage, but it still just means I felt I had to do what was right. I was willing to do it at the cost of family relationships because I don't know. So I trusted Gregory Stanton, who does know. So I guess that became my conviction that this was something that needed to be dealt with broadly as a national security crisis, really, to say we have allowed this online cult to get to Kirribilli House. What were the failings that made that happen? Because we have to rectify that immediately, lest someone has a second bite of the cherry. So I will never apologise for taking that stand. I think we had to do it. We certainly felt like we had a civic duty to do that.
Incredibly brave.
Yeah. How would we have slept at night if something had gone wrong? We had all that information. We told nobody. And it's hard to get information into the right hands when you're just a layperson. You don't have a public profile. Nobody knows who you are. You sound like a crazy person when you try and explain it to the people that could actually make the decisions. That was tricky.
Morrison claimed to have only sort of known about QAnon the last year or so. That seems a bit unlikely as well.
Yep, and I think that was said on 2GB. I'd only heard about QAnon in the last year or so. So if I as an absolute nobody, knew of QAnon for the last 3 years. I don't have any advice from ASIO or international intelligence on these things. Then there we have it. That is an absolute failure of national security under Morrison's watch. If he did happen to know about it, then he needs to be honest about that.
Yeah.
Then we've got people like me who have more ability to know intelligence, what is happening, than what our own Prime Minister has. That is an abject failure. I do not understand how that could have happened, but he is the person in charge of counterterrorism policy coordination. If he has not done the correct things to have that in place, then Australia was very, very open, potentially still is very, very open to some of these terrorist organisations that clearly we're not looking after.
The double standards are outrageous as well, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Morrison's done so obsessed with counter-terrorism. As long
the
as
African
it's
gangs,
on a brown face, African gangs, But it seems a bit odd that he doesn't know about QAnon. When the Guardian article first came out, that probably the first time people knew about the connection to Tim Stewart was all of 2019.
That would have, 2019. So even that's a long time. But if he's saying that's the first time he's ever heard of QAnon, then he's been sleeping for the last 12 months prior to that, because it was all over the US.
That's right.
There were lots of things going on.
Yeah, leading up to the insurrection in January at the Capitol building. The fact that I don't think to date Morrison has actually condemned it outright. So reminds me, you mentioned Tim Stewart was quite a Trump fan even before he was president. Again, this is just surmising. We're only going to know from what the media shows. I've seen pictures of the Morrisons. Jen Morrison's never seemed to look so happy in public as when she was hanging out with Melania and Donald. With the rest of the world going, ugh. I just find it so odd that the media haven't asked the question why she wasn't in Europe recently at the G7. I know Morrison didn't even need to be at the G7 because we're not in the G7, but he went. Other partners of heads of state were there. Also, he went to meet the Queen. Jen Morrison wasn't there. We don't know why. I'm just surmising, throwing it out there. Someone should be asking the question, so I may as well. But
I have no insight into that either. I'm trying to think back to when I last saw her in the public domain. I'm not 100% on that. No. I guess COVID is an excuse for people hiding away somewhat. Yeah, sure. But certainly I don't. But
Linnell Stewart, we think, stopped working at Kirribilli House last year?
2020.
End of 2020, when presumably things were getting a little bit hot, shall we say?
Yeah,
people were asking questions.
There'd been a bit of a run on. I think we had Crikey was continuing their articles. Ellen Winnett wrote one for News Corp. Then Penny Wong raised it in Senate estimates again to follow up a question that she'd taken on notice previously. So that was getting the heat on. I think a lot of people say, well, there's this link between News Corp, Murdoch and the Liberal Party. So if that is true, it would be a tad unsettling for a story about Tim Scott, QAnon, to appear in a News Corp paper. So I can understand that might have unsettled them a bit,
I know you've had questions over security clearance.
Yes.
Kirribilli?
I do. I can't understand. If someone like Linnell, so she might be marvellous at her job, I have no doubt she is, but the fact of the matter is her husband and her son have very radical, extreme beliefs, so they must factor in to the employment of such a person. I think if we had someone from a different religion, perhaps, that we might not be so tolerant. So my question is, was there a check done at all? It wouldn't surprise me if I heard that she was just vouched for because of that close friendship. That's not an unusual thing in other places of business, but I think when we come to Parliament, that's where we have to have a very different rule, tight one, for people employed by Prime Minister Cabinet or the Prime Minister's office. So I think I want to know, if she passed it, how? What did the checks, what were they looking for? because it was everywhere. It was everywhere. That is of concern, that who else is in Kirribilli House or employed by the state that it has been checked under all those same processes past. What other dangers are lurking because our system, our processes are so lax? And that's
absolutely chilling. It's a real problem. It's chilling. It's also chilling why the media isn't constantly asking these questions. It's like someone in Morrisons said, don't touch this subject now. It's gone, we'll put it under the carpet. But I think we really deserve to know, let's just go back to the double standards or ask the question, if an Islamic extremist was so closely connected to a Labour Prime Minister, what would the media be saying? That really is the question.
Well, I think you only have to look back. Remember, there were the two wives of Islamic State men that we weren't allowing back into the country. So they themselves, from memory, I don't believe they were necessarily members of ISIS, but their children certainly weren't. But we were not going to allow them entrance. Yet this is the same. The insurrection, rather than calling it a terrorist attack, it was a terrorist attack. Its aim was to overthrow the government. When this happened in Egypt,
overthrow democracy.
So the white skin determines that rhetoric from the highest places in Parliament. I think that's something that is very, very worrying. I think it has to be looked at as to why the rules for one, different rules for another. Certainly, we have to factor in partners. Because partners were at Kirribilli House, children were at Kirribilli House. Yet there is no way these partners or someone from an African gang of any Sudanese appearance wouldn't be able to turn up there with their partners. So it looks racist. Whether it is or it isn't, who knows? But there's a lot of inconsistencies there which need to be nutted out, definitely.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, it's mind-blowing.
It is.
Thank you so much for blowing my mind. And obviously you've done it, you're incredibly brave speaking up. Thank you again.
You're welcome. It's been a tough road, but I'm happy that we can get some national security changes in place, feel somewhat safer.
Brilliant. Okay, let's hope at least we can get people talking.
Absolutely. Thanks, Judith.